Today we're with Rolf Müller, Global Business Development Director, Media Measurement at GfK. So Rolf, what's been happening to TV viewing in the markets you cover? And has that pattern been sustained throughout the period of the pandemic, or has it changed in recent weeks?
Let's say maybe even more generally, as far as we can see at GfK, the overall media usage is up. So it's not only TV. TV consumption has risen and in parts actually dramatically, especially on news covering the corona crisis, of course, obviously. But interesting enough, we just, for example, discover that young target groups seem to be returning, you could say, to TV, as they are too in need of news. But also of entertainment. So it's actually not just the news. The news have grown strongest during the crisis, and especially at the outbreak or at the beginning of lockdowns. But it's also entertainment. Then online is soaring too, of course, which we can see in the operations where online is included in the TV currencies, such as Singapore, Germany, and Austria, for example. But also we're experiencing this enormous boost of online consumption in our syndicated cross-media panels, which we call GXL, which we have in some countries in Europe and also Latin America. And then contrary to general beliefs, actually, radio is showing quite a robustness, I would say, at least where we can truly measure in these times and also report in these times. Although in most countries drive time has near to collapsed as the people are confined to their homes during lockdown, they still do consume radio during daytime. Overall, we see only slight decrease in reach, I would say, but an increase in time spent listening. Again, this is based only on the data that we have. I guess we'll talk later about the operations themselves. And in some markets, we see these high TV figures actually already declining a bit, let's say gradually, towards a level that is lower than the peaks we had at the beginning of the lockdowns, but higher than the old normal, which is why we call them the new normal.
Or a little bit of news fatigue creeping in, maybe there, which is driving down the numbers a little. But they're still high. What about the response to advertisers to these audiences flocking into both TV and radio?
Well, that's kind of I would call it a true paradox. I mean, the ratings and reach figures in media are exceptionally high, but advertising has, I would say, overall, as far as I can see, decreased slightly in TV, and in many markets significantly in radio, actually. I mean, this is understandable as industries cannot sell their products, tourism, cars, and such, and do not necessarily want to be around the context of negative corona news. But on the other hand, we also see retailers, telcos, and other companies that have managed to rearrange their advertisement statements towards kind of helping the communities, thanking their hardworking employees. I guess you know that too in your country, feeling with the population and giving some kind of hope. But all in all, it has decreased, especially in radio. We've I mean, it of course it depends, I guess, from country to country, but we've heard of decreases of 25%. I've actually heard for private radio in Switzerland, of which is private local radio, whereas the national radio is public broadcasting and has no advertising. So private local radio in Switzerland decrease of 40 to 50% in advertising. So that's of course quite tough.
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess the other challenge, as well as the advertising issue, particularly for TV broadcasts, I don't think this applies so much to radio broadcasts, which can adapt to isolation. I'm aware of radio dramas that are continuing to be recorded simply by having people record remotely, but TV production obviously is pretty much in standstill. So are there any concerns around the supply of content. I'm assuming that a lot of this viewing is to, classic television and reruns of old football matches as much as it is to news and things like that, because a lot of the soap operas, for example, in the UK have just ceased production.
Yeah, I guess that's probably the case all around the world, I would say, as far as I can see, at least. I mean, um, I'm personally, just for example, I'm personally affected by this crisis. We would have had. I'm a great ice hockey fan, and I have season tickets for a club here in Zurich, and of course we would have been in playoff, and we actually won the preseason or the regular season, and would be in the playoffs now. And so every day on which the playoffs would have been, they just showed an old final from recent years. And so recycling like this and kind of trying to keep, now, for example, the ice hockey fans in the mood, that is done quite often, I think, also in other sports, of course.
You're not a wrestling fan?
No, I'm not a wrestling fan, no. You're talking about that Swiss type of wrestling, that specific?
No, I think Richard knows the details. It's Florida, I think, is it?
Yeah, no. Somehow in Florida, the World Wrestling Federation has managed to convince the Florida government that they're an essential business, so they have been continuing.
Okay.
I mean, you couldn't make it up. It's not how you do social distance wrestling is beyond me, but there you go.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Anyway.
So you mentioned earlier the actual production systems, how we actually get, because these TV and radio ratings out during the period of crisis. I mean, it's probably worth separating TV and radio. But so if we talk about TV firstly, what impact is this having on the TV currencies that you're running around the world, and what special measures have you had to put in place to carry on producing TV every day, TV ratings?
Yeah, well, we definitely have to separate TV and radio. That's absolutely true, because they are completely two different shoes in these times. I mean, the crisis has impacted our TV currency operations insofar as we had to invest a lot of extra work, come up with some creative new solutions, and prioritize and push some developments that had already been in the pipeline. Technological developments. The very good news is, at least from our side, that all this had actually no damaging impact on the outputs of our TV currencies, as we are relying solely on passive measurement of the respondents, and our panel management teams engage with our panelists mainly via telephone, email, even online messaging. We have only little face-to-face elements in the operation. This makes TV measurement very robust and resilient, actually. The one element which is, of course, most problematic in times like this is that the technician visits we all have, I guess, in traditional TAM operations. These had to be held off as the lockdown in our various markets began. But as the crisis had its roots in China, and we have done we do a TAM operation close to China, referring to Singapore, we learned, or had to learn actually quite quickly, quite early, how to cope with this situation. We developed video instructions for our panelists and organized remote technician visits through video calls with our panel homes. And then, of course, we do have sufficient buffers between our gross panel sizes and the daily required or even guaranteed in-tab numbers on which we have to deliver the daily currency data. So that helps too.
It's interesting. Some countries are seeing a kind of a double effect that balances out. On the one hand, they can't refresh panels. They can't recruit new panel members when panel members drop out because, for obvious reasons. But on the other hand, they are seeing higher daily in-tabs, as in the proportion of panel members reporting, because people are around and more panel members are easier to contact to sort out problems, whereas before they might be out at work or particularly single person homes, not around. Now we've got a captive audience. If the panel management wants to get hold of the house, it's much easier to do so. Are you seeing a similar phenomenon of perhaps long-term worry about the balance of the panel because you can't replenish it, but on the other hand, it's easier to contact the panel members you have got?
Yeah, no, that is absolutely true. And as you're saying, the only thing that, of course, we're wondering about is how will this last even after the crisis period, or will, and that's the bigger probability that the situation will change again. The people will be able and will want to go to work and to office, maybe not as much as they did before, but they definitely want to go back. I mean, we even see that with our own staff. And then, yes, as you said, the household is not that accessible again. So we will have to think a bit more about new solutions. It's not just being able to use the same technology, which is in some places quite complex, which is why we have technicians in the first place. So what we're also working to is what we call, let's say, easy installable, if not self-installable technology. So that is something for well, not for these weeks, although we've had that in the pipeline long before this crisis evolved. And of course, we're pushing that, and we're also discussing that with our clients. We're discussing these opportunities with our clients, and we hope to be able to roll out some of this technology very soon, actually.
Are your panels, looking across your various markets, one of the issues that this is really throwing up is the long-term future of face-to-face interviewing, in terms of, obviously it can't be done at the moment, but also whether it's going to be practical in the future. If we exit the lockdown, there still may well be an extended period of distancing being recommended, and also in terms of having interviewers willing to work and go into lots of people's homes. It's always been under threat over the last few years because of the cost as well. A two-part question really would be, what's the balance across your markets of face-to-face recruitment and interviewing versus telephone and online? And also, do you fear for the future of face-to-face recruitment, or do you think it's still going to play a role in recruiting in panels and establishment surveys in particular?
Yeah, well, we're still looking at TV, so I guess the answer would be of our TV currency operations, we actually we're, as far as I see, practically completely on telephone recruiting. Some of establishment surveys, which are not all done by GfK themselves. There are examples where we get the contacts actually for building up the panel. So some of the establishment surveys are partly on face-to-face. Yes, that's right, and there will certainly be, I guess, after these experiences here, a tendency towards going away from face-to-face, although it has its merits, of course. Going away from face-to-face towards telephone or even online. That will be, as an experience of this crisis, and on the other hand, of course, also for cost reasons. There are countries where you simply cannot afford to do face-to-face, maybe mainly, probably speaking, Central Europe or Europe in the first place. So yes, there will be, I guess, opportunities. I would think that that there will be more mixed modes also for establishment surveys, even for recruitment. So that let's say not the whole threat is concentrated in one point. But then again, I did say before that face-to-face has its merits, and while you're right that probably this crisis is going to go on a bit longer than we think or thought, I don't believe that face-to-face is going to vanish completely. in certain countries it's a good way, and still a cost-effective way to get a very good quality into your data. That is the main point. And still, if we're not talking about Scandinavian countries, then you'll still have to do some interviewing, or you can't put all interviewing onto online, for example. So you probably will still have to have elements of face-to-face. But then again, you could also change. That's not for the same target group, I guess. You could also change face-to-face to something more like video face-to-face or virtual face-to-face,
Yes.
right? As we are doing now, instead
Yeah.
of a true interview on the stage of some ASI conference.
Yeah.
I would imagine that is something that the whole market research industry, not only media measurement, will want to have deeper look into and also push.
Yeah.
Now, we're obviously also talking to people about radio currencies, and there we're seeing a lot less consistency in terms of how the currencies are coping. And obviously one of the big differences is between those that are running electronic measurement systems, those that are running day after recall or diary systems, and then even within the diary systems, whether those diaries are physical diaries or online diaries. What's your experience across your markets? Because you've obviously got a mix of both.
We have a total mix of more than both, I would say, all in all. I mean, radio is different, absolutely true. I can just underline that. In radio, we have different methodologies, even at GfK, all depending on the market circumstances, their preferences, and especially, of course, also the client's budgets. I mean, we're currently running radio currencies in 9 markets and GfK, and each of these markets have their own specific methodology, or actually combination of methods for measuring the usage of the medium in the end. For instance, some rely heavily on face-to-face recruitment, while the actual data collection is done via e-diaries and paper and pencil diaries. So these operations, for example, are heavily affected because you recruit much more compared to a TV panel. You recruit much more than simply 20% or 25% per year. Others have diaries too, but recruitment is via telephone, which makes the operation much more resilient to the COVID-19 crisis. Then we also have CATI operations for radio, so recruitment and data collection by telephone, for example, with the day after recall method. In these operations, we've seen it's absolutely key to be able to shift the field work from the typical CATI operations or typical CATI studios, actually, to CATI at home. We have succeeded, but only in parts here. And closest to TV measurement then comes the electronic measurement for radio, in our case with the Media Watch here in Switzerland. And here we have not encountered very similar, actually even more than TV, any impact, because we don't have any technicians needed on the radio currency operation at all. So because the watches are sent by postal, recruitment is telephone. Watches are sent by post to the people. They're self-installable, possibly with a little help from the panel management. And when the measurement period is over, which differs in Switzerland between 1 and 6 months per panelist, the whole equipment is sent back by post. So that is a setup that just isn't impacted really by the COVID crisis. So maybe if you want me, I can go a little bit into the specific operations.
Well, perhaps, I mean, the easy way to handle it is Radar in the UK has effectively had to cease field work because they use face-to-face field work,
Yep.
and they are now working out whether to repeat the old data or do some form of modelling. across your markets, have any of them had to actually pause, or are they all largely continuing to produce some form of data during the crisis?
It's about half and half, Richard. We have, for example, we have Australia and New Zealand, where we have paused all field work temporarily. It's likely not to be come back until Q3. So the survey 2 results in Australia were released April 16th, just a couple of days ago. But surveys 3, 4, and 5 are on hold due to the restrictions related to COVID-19. And our client, Commercial Radio Australia, and their CEO, Joan Warner, has, together with us, considered all the options and concluded that a pause in fieldwork and surveys were necessary. That's one example. On the other hand, in Australia, we have this MIP, measurement improvement program going on, as you will know about. We've reported on the super pilot in Australia, and that work is going on because that is, of course, electronic measurement. It's not the field work that's going on. The field work is actually has finished before the crisis evolved, but we're still working on the results and wanting to bring them out soon.
I mentioned Australia and the work they're doing, because it's one theory may well be that for radio, this accelerates the move towards either electronic measurement by portable devices or online diaries placed via telephone and online, for the reason that we don't know this isn't going to happen again. We may be in an era where there's pandemics every 2 or 3 years, and clients will want reassurance that business continuity is in place. If I was a client, I'd be asking, okay, well, what if this happens again next year? How will we cope? And the answer obviously is to have either portable measurement or wholly online data collection, isn't it?
Yeah, that's true, or even a mixed model. I mean, as you know, in the Australian project and also in other work we're doing, we're going towards what we call hybrid radio, which is a mixed mode of let's say, electronic measurement with a portable meter as our watch, and on the other hand, diaries, preferably, of course, e-diaries, if that is possible in a population, and to combine these two methods then in the data reporting. Which means combining, actually, well, you could say cost effectiveness on the one side with data precision, granularity on the other side. So that's the idea of the MIP in Australia, and I'm quite sure that this will be pushed in the near future. As you said, we all are aware that pandemics like this can rise again. This is probably not a one-time show in that sense. I'll give you another example. I mean, in Italy, we had as we all know, Italy was hit very, very hard and very, very extremely quickly. And Italy, we're doing the radio currency, and which is a CATI data collection. And due to the restrictions also of work, having to put the employees to home, our client asked us actually to pause with this CATI operation. The team came up with a solution, or a kind of a compensation, you could say. Instead of just having simply no data, we by chance have a cross media panel operation in Italy called Synoptica, which also where also TV and radio is actually measured besides online. usage, and so the team has come up with a kind of a compensation solution, you could say, which the clients accepted very well. That we give out electronic data for to see how did this crisis, which was so especially deep in Italy, affect the radio usage in the country.
So is that being used as currency trading data or more as market information?
I'll be honest, I think it's more market information. I'm not completely sure because this is really just ongoing. I think the data is not out yet, and I did talk with our colleagues, but they weren't totally sure what exactly is going to happen after that. It's just something that we proposed, and which the client accepted very well. And like I say, that is exactly the situation where a crisis like that is pushing towards methods that are less affected by such a crisis.
And finally, I think one of the themes that seems to be emerging is that the crisis is forcing and accelerating creativity amongst staff and statisticians and everyone about how to deal with the crisis, and people are discovering new ways of doing things that actually they're thinking might be good to carry on with after the crisis, such as the balance between home working and office working, but perhaps at a more specific level for our business, how we you mentioned making meters more self-installable, areas where modelling might be able to work. Do you see some positives coming out of this in terms of innovation?
Yes, well, definitely. I mean, it's going to push us all, if not only to be prepared for the next situation, which might be very similar to this one here. So, as I said, I mean, I personally, I was so surprised. I'm used to home office, clearly, as I have a global role and therefore have to contact a lot without not always wanting to travel and not always needing to travel in normal times. But I was actually very surprised, positively surprised that that GfK as a whole, with 8,000 employees, switched to home from work for most of these 8,000 employees, and also in media measurement, and that the systems were also already ready for this, that our IT was quite well in place, because I had actually feared that step. But all the same, I mean, we've talked about face-to-face interviewing, which is affected heavily. So that is definitely going to be one of the measures and the things we're looking at together with clients in the future, is to gradually go away from face-to-face, lift it to telephone, even online, or other forms of face-to-face, as I said. That's the one part. The other part is definitely technology, which we are working on to make it simpler, and make it actually at least easy to install, for panel homes, for example, or individuals, as our Media Watch shows. Those are all tendencies that are going to be, I'm very sure, going to be pushed in the near future.
Well, thanks for your time. It's been really fascinating insight into what's going on across GfK markets, and we'll check in, hopefully when things get back to normal, or if the crisis is protracted, to see how you're getting on. But thanks for your time, Rolf.
I thank you too. Thanks a lot.
Cheers, Rolf.